So our Gemara, yes, in Kiddushin Daf Lamed Tet Amud Bet, opens with or minhi, lahashlich, in Hebrew. Literally, it is hurled against. It is hurled. It's shorthand. Yes. But what it means is the contradiction is hurled, is thrown between this Mishnah, our Mishnah, as we call the Mishnah that we're studying, whatever Mishnah we're studying, and a Baraita. Of course, the word Baraita means chitzoni in Hebrew, outside in English. In other words, it wasn't included by Yehuda Hanasi, by Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, by Rabbi, in his Mishnah. In other words, he edited tremendous amount of teachings, traditions. Yes, editing means he chose some of those inherited, amassed teachings, and then he ordered them in a certain way, and decided on what kind of language should be the kind of formal, approach that would be applied throughout. And yet, these remain authoritative as well. That which wasn't included was not included in the. So there's a contradiction between this Mishnah and the Baraita, which in my translation in brackets I note, there's more than note, which reflects a contradiction between this Mishnah and our life experience. And we're going to see that the Midrash is constantly doing this. And Harry Wolfson, though he applies it not to all biblical interpretation, but I would say, it more than seems to me, that this is what drives all of Midrash, whether it's Midrash Halacha or Midrash Agadah, namely that there's some kind of a contradiction between the teaching, the tradition, verses in the Bible, or traditions of Torah Shebaal Peh that come down to us. Contradictions between are problematic. An objection can be raised when we put these inherited traditions, ideas, or practices, Agadah or Halacha, up against a life experience. Now, everyone, of course, doesn't have the same life experience, but in a sense we do. We just interpret, in large part, there's overlap, or to a significant degree, there's overlap between people's different experiences. But how we understand them is another thing, of course. Our responses to suffering, in the case of suffering, as well as of joy, etc., and everything in between, gradations in between. Yes. Everyone whose merits exceed his crimes, his failings, bad is done to him, happens to him, and so much so that it seems as one who has burned all of the Torah completely, such that it does not remain from the Torah even one letter. While all those failings exceed his merits, yes, when all whose failings exceed his merits, good is done to him or her, so much so that it seems as one who has fulfilled all of the Torah completely, such that there is not lacking from the Torah even one letter. So, in other words, here, what is the contradiction? Well, actually, we continue. We haven't fully. The Gemara here hasn't reached yet the full elaboration of the contradiction, and indeed, it will be a life experience. But this particular teaching, yes, the consequence for doing bad or for doing good is not long life or inheriting the land, but again, there's unclarity. What does it mean inheriting the land? All right, we're gonna have problems right now. But whatever they are, there's some kind of positive consequence. Certainly, long life is clear. Yes, and yet this teaching in the Baraita that everyone whose merits exceed his failings, bad is done to him, happens to him, so much so that it seems as one who has burned all the Torah, such that there does not remain from even one letter of the Torah that's left, while all whose failings exceed his merits, good happens to him, so that it seems as one who has fulfilled all the Torah altogether. I mean, this is saying very often in life, I don't know that we have to read it, certainly that would contradict experience as well. But that very often, or too often in life, the person whose merits exceed his failings, actually bad happens. I would prefer the translation I've offered both possibilities. Is done to him, really happens to him, because we're really talking here about a direct intervention, a direct awareness of the divine, of a particular person or group of people, and then intervening in some way that bad happens to that person? Or is it somehow the rules of life or the probability factors of life, if we really look at it coldly and sober-mindedly and just the facts, what happens to people in life? Well, let's go on in the Gemara. I'm moving ahead a bit, and hence the 3 dots. Rabbi Yaakov is he who has said a reward or the recompense, a good consequence of a commandment in this world does not exist. Yes? Yeah? Where is it here? Rabbi Yaakov. Hidamar schar mitzvah b'hai alma alika leka. D'Tanya Rabbi Yaakov Omer ein lecha kol mitzvah v'mitzvah shekatuva b'Torah shematan schara b'tzida she'en tchiyat hametim tluya ba. B'kibud av v'em k'tiv l'man yarichon yamecha v'l'man yetiv lach v'shilucha ken k'tiv l'man yetiv lach v'herachti yamim. Okay, so he says there's no commandment written in the Torah whose recompense, whose consequence, whose so-called reward, the giving, the happening of that positive consequence about any commandment. Yes, that's written in the Torah, which again is only 2 that explicitly says so, about those specific 2 commandments. But not those also, even those, the positive consequence, matan schara b'tzida she'en tchiyat hametim tluya ba. In other words, these are conditional. The positive result is conditional on an eschatological world is dependent upon a world that we don't live in yet. In that ideal world, if one does something good, good should come of it. Would come of it. Will come of it in a perfect world, in an ideal world. But in ours, more complicated. Yes? How did I translate? There isn't a way at all that any commandment whatsoever, even when it's good consequences explicitly written in the Torah alongside her, as these two commandments, Kibud Av V'Em, V'Shiluach HaKen, but any of the commandments, including those two, any good consequence that might explicitly be written in the Torah alongside it, or that we might surmise otherwise, I don't know, is not none of all of those. You don't have any that's not dependent upon the end of days. In other words, resurrection of the dead, or in other words, that's going to happen at the end of days. Again, how to understand resurrection of the dead? Could you be a little more explicit there? Like a miracle occurs in our cartoon, yes? Does it mean literally the dead physically rise? As Woody Allen would say, that might be the case, but then will they be able to take showers and go to the movies? But, so the interpretation of how to understand Chiyat HaMeitim, B'Yemot HaMashiach, is another matter. In my own view, is that what we really have happening there is a reaction to early Christianity. There were beginnings which still are part of Judaism, really, but that this emerging sect within Judaism, and certain elements in Gnosticism, which are strongly influential in certain circles, whether it's the Essenes, the Essenes, or the followers of Jesus. There's an emphasis on the spirit over the letter of the law, or the spiritual over the earthly, over the worldly, over the everyday, which in a very real way the halachic, the love affair with the halachic system, is really some sort of affirmation of the everyday. When sanctified, but you still are in the everyday, every aspect of life. Nothing is regarded as taboo, as that which we should not take up and implement with joy and sanctifying it. But of course that means it has to be lived, it has to be practiced, it has to be experienced, engaged in certain ways. Concerning the honoring of father and mother, as it is written, so that your days are made to be long, and so that good benefit will be done, will happen to you. In other words, this the second part of our Mishnah's formulation, and he inherits the land, he or she, and that isn't the exact language in these commandments. It's that you'll have long life and good will be done to you. Indeed, it happened. Indeed, we have a story. We have an incident. It happened, and it doesn't just happen once. This happens, whether it's Holocaust, tonight begins Yom HaShoah here in Israel. Indeed, it happened that to him, namely his son, his father said, "Go up to the top of the tree and bring me the young birds." So here you have an instance where both commandments, the only two where explicitly the positive consequence is claimed, is stated for them. So here we have an incident where someone is observing both of those, implementing, fulfilling both of those commandments. Because the child going up the tree is fulfilling Kibbut Av V'Aim, in this case Av, who tells him, asks him, go up and take the baby birds. We have some significant enough need for food. Go up there, to that tree and get those mother birds. So we have someone fulfilling both of the commandments, was explicitly Kibbut Av V'Aim and Shiluach Haken. Go up to the top of the tree and bring me the young birds. So he went up to the top of the tree and he sent away the mother, and he took the offspring. In other words, he did exactly what the commandment states, and he was fulfilling the commandment at the same time of honoring his father, one of his parents. But in his returning, he fell from his going up the tree, climbing up the tree, and he died. He fell, and the height was enough, and the angle was enough, and the child's, however old he was, body was in its development such that, as we say, broke his neck, or right, the fall was fatal. Excuse me. Yes. Here's how the Gemara continues, yeah? Oh, where are the goodness of days of this young person? And where is the lengthening of days for this? The Gemara is not afraid. The rabbis are not afraid to raise the contradiction. That's not Talmudic to just say, oh, well, God must have his reasons, or, whatever. I mean, in a way, we're going to have that opinion here. I mean, but that won't be the only opinion. But, I mean, there are philosophies of religious experience, strong directions within the different approaches of Christianity. This would be much more common than in Rabbinic Judaism to not even ask the question. There's no question. When Rabbi Akiva and his colleagues are being tortured by the Romans, yes, same thing. We have the Malachei HaSharet themselves ask, Zot Torah, Zot Schara, is this the Torah and is this the consequence of studying Torah? Well, yes, the answer could be. If you're going to pursue the religious life, the ethical life, in a really serious way, you're going to be running against the stream, neged hazerim, of much of society, especially of the powers that be. You're going to get yourself in quite a pickle, as Shalom Aleichem would say. That's often the tendency, if you're really going to insist on a path of excellence that really is genuine and authentic and goes to the guts of what the religious life is about, or the musical life is about. If you want to pursue the piano with excellence, or in the scientific field, if you're going to be Galileo or Louis Pasteur, everyone's going to say you're crazy and dangerous. So maybe Torah, Rabbi Akiva follows Torah when he's studying Torah in public even, under the Roman occupation at a time when the Roman authorities outlawed it. But as I'm arguing metaphorically, that really as a figure, this as an emblem, as a larger universal idea, something else that happens throughout this course from day one, I'm sharing with you, is to try to identify something universal that's in everybody's experience. This is what Peter Berger does in The Room of Angels, his signals of transcendence. Looks for something, he calls it the anthropological starting point, looking for something within every human being's experience, or many or most. Maybe some don't recognize these experiences in the way that Peter Berger argues they can more than plausibly be understood, experienced. But so where are the goodness of days of this young person? Where is the lengthening of days for this? Jeremiah says, why, how can the wicked be prospering? Too many of them. Too many of the righteous are the innocent. Yes, are suffering. How can that be? He asked the question. The book of Job asked the question. It doesn't say, neither of those books, of those teachings say, well, God must have his reason why this one survived, and the overwhelming majority in their millions, including 1 million children, and then under Stalin, tens of millions of people, men, women, and children. Does that make sense? Stuff seems to come together in my life, so I guess there must be a reason God is behind it. So then I guess God is behind millions and millions of people who don't even, things aren't falling into place. They don't even have anything to eat. They and their children are starving, malnutrition, and are in situations of genocidal wars. Rape is more common than the sun rising in the morning, or just as common. So maybe another understanding of our experience, another understanding of what is the reality God involved, what is the reality human being involves, what is the reality free will involves, relative free will, or etc. All these questions. What is the purpose of the Torah? What should be the motivation for the life of Torah and mitzvot, etc.? Who's serving who? Is God serving us, or are we serving God? But rather, the phrase, so that now the Gemara responds to the question, well, where's the long life for this boy who fulfilled both of these commandments? Where is the good for this boy? But rather, Ella, it's a wonderful word. It's one of the most frequently appearing words in the rabbinic discourse, literature, teachings. Aleph Lamed Aleph. But rather, so you think it's like this, we think it's like this, I think it's like this, and sometimes it might be, but not for too long. Because the angel is always pointing elsewhere. Of course, I cut out the ram and Isaac over here, and the knife in Abraham's hand. But that's because I think that really it's all about the angel saying, it's elsewhere, it's elsewhere. You're focusing on this. But a true monotheist who's looking to connect with the otherness, the uniqueness of the divine, the difference of the divine. The divine is different from us. It's not like Jesus. It's not like Krishna. Yes, we have personification language for the divine. But ultimately, you can't compare the divine to anything in the sky or in the earth or below, says in chapter 20 of Exodus. Don't liken the divine to anything in the earth or the sky or anything below. Well, that's everything. I mean, except maybe, excuse me for any of you who are residents. I mean, my sister and her family is in New Jersey, except maybe New Jersey isn't exactly, in the sky, the earth, and below. But I mean, it includes everything else, everything in your experience. The divine is not like anything in your experience. It's quite challenging if you want to get close to the divine or catch glimpses of it. Ella, but rather, yes, so that good will happen for you. This this is about that which will occur in that world which is altogether perfectly good. This is Rabbi Yaakov, so following his view. Bo'olam shekulot tov, Bo'olam shel tchiyat hametim, Bo'olam shel haketz hayamim. The end of days, what a wonderful phrase. Bo'olam shekulot tov. In a perfect world. In a world that is all good. Yes, that should be. A person who does good should happen to that person. Certainly not terror. Terror should happen. Not little or medium or horrific misfortune should happen. Catastrophe, suffering. But we don't live in a perfect world, says Rabbi Yaakov, in a world that is all good. And then another view in the Gemara, anonymous, says, but perhaps this actually never happened. Rabbi Yaakov says, no, it was actually an actual event which he himself witnessed. In other words, the father sending up the boy to take the baby birds, shoo away the mother bird, take the baby birds. And of course, it's absurd here. The objector, the one who objects, who raises a kushiyah, that maybe this story didn't happen, actually happen. It's just a tradition or something, the storytellers tell or whatever. No, I mean, it's so silly, such a thing, because of course it always happens. I mean, if that not specifically, as I said before, small, medium, and larger than, more horrific than the mind can grasp. Bad things were happening to good people and innocent people. Probably to most, as I say. Especially in something like the Holocaust. I mean, we didn't win that, We often become so central to our Judaism, too central. There was an editorial, an opinion piece in one of the Israeli newspapers today about that. We kind of glorify everybody has to go to Auschwitz and, perhaps at too young an age. And what's the message supposed to be? I don't know. The whole world is against us always. And I don't know what, God has his reasons, Maimonides says in chapter 12 of part 3 of the guide, the truly religious consciousness is not seeing ourselves at the center of God's attention. As Leibovitz says, I've shared this with you already, earlier in our course. As Professor Yeshayahu Leibovitz said, put it, we're not God isn't supposed to serve us. We're supposed to serve God. So Rabbi Yaakov says, no, this actually happened. But again, you don't need this specific. I mean, life is full of small, medium, and large instances of people doing good and people who are innocent and good who experience very bad things happen to good people. Was it Harold Kushner? But perhaps he was thinking now, as another view says, no, but wait a minute. It looks like he was doing those two commandments, which indeed, if he was only doing those two, he would have not fallen from the tree, or from the ladder, as we'll see. But perhaps he was thinking of to trespass, to do something wrong while he was going up the tree. Maybe he was thinking idolatrous thoughts we're thinking of how after he brings down the baby birds, he's going to do something, that goes against one of the mitzvot aseh or lo taseh. Okay, but now that is rebutted. There's a rebuttal for that. There's a retort, a terutz. A bad, a wrong thought, the sacred may it be acknowledged. Yes, blessed, Baruch is Berech, the root of the knee, bending the knee. Yes, bowing. It may have to do with acknowledging. Because the word bless, I don't know what does bless mean, it's... So again, I'm trying to be, could you be more explicit there in your calculation on the blackboard with all these calculus equations and algebra and then you say a miracle occurs. What do you mean by miracle? What do you mean by, in this case, blessing, bracha? A wrong thought or a bad thought, the Holy One, blessed be He, does not attach, does not connect that to a deed, does not consider it as an actual deed, fulfilled action. So there's not going to be, that wouldn't make sense. That wouldn't make sense. There wouldn't be a negative. That wouldn't cancel the good that should come, the long life that should come, and other good from doing these two commandments. But perhaps he was thinking about serving, worshiping the stars, that even idolatry, as it is written in Ezekiel. See, the other opinion is coming back and saying, well, but maybe, this was as serious a matter as thinking, maybe he was thinking idolatrous thoughts. And in Ezekiel chapter 14, verses 4 and 5, it says, for I will hold the house of Israel responsible for idolatry that is in their heart. See, so this other view comes back and he says, well, here's a verse that says that even I hold them responsible, even if it is just a thought and not put into action. But this also is refuted, as Rabbi Yaakov has said. If it should arise in your mind that the consequences of a commandment occurs in this world, then why didn't the commandments protect him so that he not come to such a thought? Or, so Rabbi Yaakov says, well, wait a minute, but if you perform commandments, they're supposed to protect you, but in a really complete sense. They would envelop you, and then that would protect you also from having idolatrous thoughts, a view that Rabbi Yaakov, a tradition that he argues. Yet Rabbi Elazar said, but what about the teaching that those sent to carry out a commandment are not harmed? There, that teaching is so when they are on their way. That is different from our case. So Rabbi Elazar says, all right, but even if you don't take the view that if you perform a commandment, you're enveloped, you're protected from all harm, including thinking of violating a commandment, as serious as idolatry, then Rabbi Elazar says, all right, even if you don't accept that, don't we have the teaching that those sent to carry out a commandment are not harmed? But then another opinion comes back and says, yeah, but the teaching says when they're on their way to implement a commandment, no harm will be done. But this is after he did the commandment, he's coming down from the tree, and that's when he falls. So, there, that teaching is so, yet Rabbi Elazar cited another version of that teaching, namely, those sent to carry out a commandment are not harmed, neither on their way nor upon their return. So Rabbi Elazar knows his Baraitot, knows his various traditions, even if they weren't included in the Mishnah. And so he cites this one as well, which includes, yes, on our way to perform a commandment and also afterwards. At least immediately afterwards. Now another point of view is raised. But it was a rickety ladder. Sulam Ra'ua. I love that, isn't it? Incredible. So another view says, which follows Rabbi Yaakov's approach, in a perfect world, you're not going to have a rickety ladder. But our world is a rickety ladder. Sulam Ra'ua. It's a metaphor. It's literal. Here it's both literal and a metaphor. What a wonderful metaphor, a figure, an emblem for our life. Our world is not the perfect Olam Shekulo Tov. Our world is like a rickety ladder. And more specifically, when you have a rickety ladder, literally, and you're going to use it to send your son up a tree, even though he's going to be fulfilling 2 of the commandments, you've got to check the ladder. It was a sulam ra'ura, an unsteady ladder, which established that injury was likely. And in all situations where injury is likely, one must not depend on a miracle, as it is written in 1 Samuel chapter 16, verse 2. Then Shmuel said, How can I go seeing that when Saul hears that you have rejected him as king, right, you, God, he will kill me. Rabbi Yosef said, if only, so let's go back to the Shmuel, I'm sorry. So the Shmuel verse is saying, shouldn't Shmuel say to himself, oh, all right, I'll go see Saul, to tell him that you, God, have rejected him now as king before you accepted him, but now you reject him and someone else is going to become king. Why would Samuel say to God, how can I go tell Saul that, because he'll kill me, if Shmuel felt that, well, I'm doing a good thing, so God will be with me. Isn't that what many religions, this is what we say? Well, I'm going to be doing good things, so God will be with me. But Shmuel says, no, this is like a rickety ladder. This is a problem. In our complicated world, it's not the perfect world. I'm doing something proper. I'm giving them the truth, the God-awful truth. But people don't want to hear that. He has power. He could have me killed. Kill him on the spot himself. Now there's another little section here. Rabbi, this is kind of an epilogue, an afterword. Rabbi Yosef said, if only Acher, namely Rabbi Elisha ben Abuya, had sought to read this biblical text about the long life and the good life that would happen to a person who keeps the commandment. If he had only read this verse as Rabbi Yaakov does, namely that this is only in the perfect world, but not in our world. That's in the ideal. That should happen, would happen, but not in our world. Well, if only Acher, Rabbi Elisha ben Abuya, because he saw such an event. He saw such an event, or this very event. And it was one of the reasons that he left Judaism and left the life of Torah and Mitzvot and Emunah. If only he had known this interpretive approach, which can negotiate between a teaching of our tradition, a perspective of our tradition, and its contradiction to our experience. Rabbi Yaakov was able to negotiate between those. If only Rabbi Elisha ben Abuya knew that you can do that, you should do that. Ein kozvim lakadosh baruch hu. We have that in another one of our texts about the Anshe Knesset Agdolah. You can't lie before the divine. Don't lie before the divine. You've got to say it like it is, including that bad stuff happens to people. And the good stuff isn't always, if ever, the divine orchestrating directly for that individual in any way. The divine has given free will to people. Some people use it to be cruel to others and murder millions, horrifically. Men, women, children, old people in a wheelchair, doesn't matter. Infants, 1 day old, doesn't matter. They murdered them all. As I said before, we tend to forget this with the kind of glorifying we have, how inspired we are by the Holocaust and the survivors, etc. But it was a terrible defeat. In the end, the Nazis were defeated by the Allies. and we were able to continue as a people. But the loss was unbelievable. And European Jewry, in terms of numbers even, was pretty much wiped out. Strange phrase, pretty much. Also, it's ironic, says Rabbi Yaakov, the son of his daughter. Yes, and actually, Elisha ben Abuya was related to Rabbi Yaakov, is related to Rabbi Yaakov. So, by family relation. So, he should have known about, he could have talked to Rabbi Yaakov, he could have seen this other strategy of reading our texts, our traditions, and understanding them, and interpreting them, and reinterpreting them, redefining them when necessary, when they contradict so strongly and clearly our experience. Then he wouldn't have gone astray. And Achar, what happened that led him to his going astray? There are those who say that a case such as this he saw. So I forgot about. Not everyone says that was the instance that, finished him off. It was too much for him, that caused him to leave the life of Torah v'mitzvot. While there are those who say that the tongue of Chutzpit, the translator, he saw, which was cut off from him. So others say it was the torturing that we just mentioned before of Rabbi Akiva and his too many of his colleagues. And Elisha ben Abuya saw the tongue of Chutzpit, the translator, cut off in the torturings of the Roman by the hands of the Romans. Still, another report is that he said, "Such a mouth from which jewels went forth should now lick the dust." Some say, even say there were those that heard Elisha ben Abuya, saw him witnessing this torture of Chutzpit HaMatargaman, and he even said, such a mouth that spoke such beautiful truths, should now lick the dust, should now be tortured, should now have to undergo this. That shouldn't be what happens. Well, you're right, Elisha ben Abuya. It shouldn't be. But it is. It too often is. So piles and 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 piles of bodies, of corpses, suitcases and shoes and eyeglasses from all across Europe. Shoes belonging, as I say, to infants, to old people, wheelchairs, all. It's true. It's true. I want to share with you, learn with you closely, a couple more of our texts that are before us, looking to us this week to engage them seriously. So we'll do that in another video a little bit later tonight. I hope to record those, share them with you. Thank you for joining me, for your trust. with your ideas, and you're wrestling and struggling with these questions, with the offerings of this course of this professor and professor is an offering for your exploration. So we continue. Bezrat Hashem. Bezrat Torah. But it's not everything is up to him, her, it alone. The reality we hold divine. Bezrat Hashem is different than Inyan Tzeh Hashem. Because Bezrat Hashem is God's help. We need God's help, but we also mostly need for ourselves to do what we should be doing. Ourselves includes all of humanity, and specifically our own people, that we should do what we should be doing, realize the realities of our situations, the bad and the good, and the in-between, make wise decisions, how to stay alive. That's the beginning. And then once that's been fairly enough secured, what to do with our lives.